Well, I'd like to tell you a couple things about Marvin. You saw him on the panel earlier. He is the co-founder of Encore Green Environmental, and he's a founding board member of the nonprofit Synergy for Ecological Solutions. He developed the patent-pending methodology, Conservation by Design, which transforms industrial water for conservation, agriculture, and the meeting of ESG goals. You mentioned the fact he was a rodeo clown. That's a culture all in and of itself, right? We all come from these different cultures, and there's something to learn from everybody, I'm convinced. So I'm just the eternal student. That's not on my bucket list, but I think it's amazing. Will you please welcome to the stage Mr. Marvin Nash.
Thank y'all for having me. We're going to whip right through this. If you haven't or do not understand ESG, environmental social governance, I've heard everybody talk about all of the governmental issues, the climate change issues, the carbon capture issues. If you're not engaged in environmental social governance, get your head out of the sand. I attended a conference in Frisco, Texas 4 weeks ago, an energy conference. And a major investment firm, the director, the big suit from New York, came in and said, ladies and gentlemen, if you do not have an ESG plan for your private equity request or your financial issues, do not come to the table. If you don't believe that there's not an input, ask Exxon. They just lost some board members and got some board members replaced. So it wasn't really, I think, like Mark brought to my attention, it wasn't really Exxon. I think you said that it was the board, but the reality of it was that changes are taking place. And I, as much challenge that I've had with ESG, just the concept of you know, possibly governmental interference, the positive thing for me is that it's a disruptor. ESG is addressing or at least acknowledging what Mark talked about. Maybe not in the right way, maybe not fast enough. We don't want it to be like a tax form that you just check the boxes, but at least it's a pathway to have the conversation. So as I told you, my name is Marvin Nash. I represent 3 different entities here today. I represent Encore Green Environmental. We're an agriculture company. We are a woman-owned agriculture company, and the woman that owns it happens to be Darlene Nash, and she's nice enough to let me work here. We're a little bit different from the energy industry approach in that we are an agriculture company working with a lot of energy independent and major companies on water management and ESG. And at the end of the day, water is one of the driving forces, if not the driving force, behind soil health and ranching and industry. How long has water and water treatment been around? I'm not smart enough to quote chapter and verse, but back there in the good book, Moses showed up. There wasn't no water to drink. All of the people were very upset. Moses didn't know what to do. He prayed, and he was told to take a stick or a lamb or a bush or a branch and throw it into the lake, into the pond. And he did that, and the water was clean to drink. So water treatment's not a new deal, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been around a long time. Encore Green is the first company that we started. I was going to clean up a little water and put it on an old man's land so his grandkids could increase their production and soil health. That was 3 years ago. We've done that in a pilot form and in an expanded form, but it has definitely been a challenge. From Encore Green, we started talking about water, and we came up with Carbon Asset Network. I'm not a big cap and trade guy, just to be real honest with you. Had a conversation with our governor. Wyoming's a cool place because you can have a conversation with the governor in the hallway during the Cattlemen's Conference. And I said, Mr. Gordon, you ever sold any carbon credits? He said, I did, Marvin. I sold $140,000 worth. And I said, wow, that's good. He said, the middleman took $70,000 straight off the top. I said, that's bad. I said, for what? And he said, because they were the middlemen. I said, well, I got an idea. He said, I'll help you any way I can, but I'm not paying you 50%. So don't come to me with an idea that takes 50%. We do not call carbon a credit. We call it an asset because it's already in the ground like a mineral. So that's what the Carbon Asset Network does. Connected to that is Synergy for Ecological Solutions. And the reason we have Synergy for Ecological Solutions is we needed a pathway for funding. If I'm an environmentalist and I'm really concerned, or if I'm just a human being and I'm really concerned about climate change, climate wellness, soil health, all of these things, what can I do to change it? How do I get engaged? Well, it's simple. I eat vegan. I sort my trash. And I take a sign and I go protest. Now, today I learned that Mark's got a whole lot of other ideas. And if, with his permission, we're going to start sharing those on our website to connect to your website so that people can see that there truly are other options. But for the most part, when we talk to people, they don't understand those and they don't see those. So this networking thing you're doing it's working. So represent 3 different entities: Encore Green, Synergy for Ecological Solutions, and Carbon Asset Network. This talk's called the 3 Ds of ESG. ESG is environmental social governance. Every corporation has got an ESG form. Some of them just check them off, some of them respond, some of them do things, some of them they don't. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the 3 Ds. But here's the really important part. If we don't all work together, if the energy industry, the agriculture industry, and the environmental industry does not all cooperate for a successful end, the energy industry doesn't lose. The ag industry doesn't lose. The environmentalists don't lose. The environment loses. And that's where the wheels fall off. Because if we don't cooperate and work together, we do not accomplish our goals. So by the time I get through giving this talk today, this time and 5 more will make a half a dozen. So I'm probably going to read the clip notes because I haven't really memorized all of it yet. So we got to make sure that we all work together, because if we don't, nobody really wins. So what are the 3 Ds, the 3 Davids of ESG? So let's look at them one at a time. The first D is do something. Do something. But now, what is something? Rich may have an idea of what something is. Mark may have an idea of what something is. There you go, thank you. Ron, may have an idea of what something is. And so we often get hung up about what is something. If you're going to have a business model, if you're going to run a ranch, if you're going to run a business, if you're going to do if you're going to do a summit, you've got a business plan and boom, 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 you knock it out. But identify something. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. That slide that you're looking at right now, I think everybody has a hat. We have the hard hats, which represent the energy industry. We've got the cowboy hats, which represent whatever cowboy hats represent nowadays: freedom, independence, free spirit, not a lot of governmental controls. And then we've got our bandana, and that represents that environmentalist free spirit. We're going to talk about the connectivity between them as we get a little farther along. So the ESGs are do, and do. First one is do something. What is something? Write it down. Go to Google. See what works for you. Something could be a lot of things. Something could be, I was really intrigued listening to the worm lady talk the other day when we were having lunch. She was telling me about worms in little garden areas. We've got a project coming up in Wyoming. The soil is dead, dead, dead. It's on some drilling rig locations or some completed wells. And I said, man, you know, I need to tell my agronomist that maybe we need some worms. I'm from South Texas, so, you know, we have moisture, so everything grows, so we have worms. Wyoming, we don't have a lot of worms. But it was interesting to talk to her. So something may be a seed program. It may be additional water. The one thing that we do know, no matter what you're talking about soil health, if you have water, you can create improvement. It's really hard to improve something without moisture. It's almost impossible. Not saying it can't be done, but the challenge is really, really hard. So do something. We learn, we adjust, and we do something. Next slide is do it right. Now this is a can of worms that we cannot get the lid back on sometimes. This is the five-headed dragon, and you cut one head off, and you go to the other head, and the other head just grew back. What is right? You know, I've started having to use corporate lawyers. I can get 3 lawyers lined up and I can get 6 answers. I can talk about 30 acres or 30,000 acres and I can line up 5 different agronomists and I can get 10 different answers. I was talking to some folks here that are thinking about putting in some acreage, and one of the things I said was, look and see what people around you are doing that you consider successful and then follow that model. See what they're doing right that you like, and then follow that. But let's not get hung up on the conversation about what is right. We do soil testing. We use the Haney test. It's an old NRCS test. Some people don't think it's the right test. But what we do is we're consistent about it. We GPS all of our test sites. We test at 6 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches, and 24 inches. And we take each probe, take that dirt, put it in a plastic bag, send it to the lab, GPS it so we know exactly where we took that test, and we get back the density and the biomass and all the things that we get with the test, and the agronomist says, according to this text, there's X pounds of carbon captured in this soil. So that's our benchmark on where we start. Is that right? I can probably find somebody that will say, no, that's not the right way to do it. But wait a minute. I went back to number 1, which was what? Do something. Carbon capture is going to be a real challenge because no one can agree on how you quantify it. So you know what we did? We just called it an asset, and we made our own quantification. And it's your responsibility. If you're going to prove me wrong, and I'm not saying you can't, but we did something, and we're doing it right. So that's number 2. That's the number 2 D. The third D. Did I get to the third D? Oh, that went the wrong way. Do it now. Don't do it a year from now. Don't do it a year from now. I don't need it. It's good. Do it now. What can you walk out of here this evening and do in the morning or do tonight? I think I told you all my story. I got a plane ticket with a carbon footprint on it. And it really chipped me off because I felt bad for riding on the plane. Well, I didn't have enough horses to ride all the way here. Now, you know, I actually did. This is a true story. Look it up, Starving Marvin Nash. I actually rolled my rodeo clown barrel from Ocala, Florida to Cody, Wyoming. I walked 1,800 miles afoot to share a message about bullying and choice making and those kind of things. Why did I do that? Number 1 is I had the time. Number 2, I couldn't afford a press agent. So it was a way to promote what we were doing. I can tell you personally what it's like to be walking across Kansas on the side of the road and looking out there thinking, damn, them old frontier folks was tough. I get to go get in a motel room at the end of the night tonight, and I get to take a shower, and them ladies had them babies right there in the wagon. They loaded up 2 or 3 hours later, and they took off. And there was Indians coming after them. And there was tragedy, and there was bad cowboys. That's tough. That's where the frontiers people that made it so we can do all this stuff. So do it now. No more excuses. My writer that wrote this for me, he's a really smart guy, and he said, he wrote on here, the pathway is climate wellness. Let's make the climate healthy. Do we need cover on all of it? Yeah, we do. It's not going to hurt us. Do we need to listen to what Mark said? You bet we do. Can each and every one of us do each and every one of those things? No. But you know what each of us can do? We can do something. We can do it right, and we can do it now. There are a lot of different ideas on what's right. But I believe in free enterprise, and I'm going to let you decide. I'm going to let you decide. I'm going to let you decide. Mark, I'm going to let you decide what is right. Because what may be right for you right now may not be right for somebody else. We patented a process on treating water and stuff to do it what we thought was the right way. But because we were talking about how complicated climate is, we call it conservation by design, because you kind of have to design each project based on what's going on where you're at right that minute. And so you have to think through, because what may be right for Rich may not be right for everybody else. Where he's at up there in Idaho, right? Washington. Up there in Washington, Oregon. It may not be right for my MOU partner in Midkiff, Texas. Different climates, different elevations, different growing seasons. But do something. Do it now. Let's stop the talk. Let's take action. Let's go forward. Let's just don't get around to where we just don't do anything. Let's make it happen. I can't stress enough about all three of these hats. I can't stress enough about academia, about energy engineers, about that cowboy spirit that doesn't want anybody telling them what to do. Everybody's got a hat. But we also have a call to action. We're not ever going to completely agree on everything. So we have to figure out where we can compromise. We have to figure out, okay, maybe we do this for a year, and then we have to do that. I mean, if you want to talk about water, you can't even get the EPA to agree on water, because they have a set of water rules for west of the 98th meridian and a set of water rules for east of the 98th meridian. So where you're at depends on what you can do. But we have to compromise, we have to work together, and we have to do those things. The energy industry, they have a lot of water. When you frack, whether you believe in it or don't believe in it, when you frack, there's water that comes up out of the ground. But when you produce a well, for every barrel of oil that you make, depending on where you're at, there's 3 to 10 barrels of water. It has salt in it. It has boron in it. It might have some norms in it. But we were smart enough to figure out how to take those out. We were smart enough to figure out how to get a Department of Environmental Quality permit that said the water met these parameters, and we based that on the soil. The soil will tell you what you need. You can't just take 12 inches of water and put it on the ground. If you've got land that hadn't had much water, you may just be able to put 3 inches, but you can do that 2 or 3 different times. So we had to develop conservation by design to get us through that. We had to develop a way to satisfy the environmental concerns. And that's what we did. We're so into the environmental concern part of it, when we take a water sample, our company never touches it A third-party independent engineering firm or laboratory comes and takes it, and to go one step farther, we don't record it. The lab sends it to a website, and it goes into a blockchain. So then the blockchain has the records for the safety of not tampering with or compromising what the results were. We do water just like you build a house or when you build a building. Boom, you get an engineer stamp. If we don't get the engineer stamp, we don't put the water out. It's that simple. But the environmentalists had concerns, and we had to meet those concerns. As I mentioned, we use conservation by design. It's pretty simple. You take the water at the wellhead, you put it in a tank, you test it, you run it through a treatment center, you retest it, you put it in another tank, you make sure that it met the parameters good for the soil, the brown ground turns green, the CO2 comes out of the air, and the oxygen goes back. Photosynthesis 101. It's really not complicated. It's back to what we learned in 7th grade physical science class. Of course, me, I took 7th grade 3 times, but that's okay. I still learned photosynthesis. Wasn't hard. There's 3 groups. There's 1 pathway. The Synergy for Ecological Solutions is the nonprofit. So let's say we have a landowner, and he wants to improve his soil health. Matter of fact, we have about 20 or 30 that total over 100,000 acres. And they want to do something. But they can't get in an RCS loan because their fences are not straight enough, or the acreage isn't mapped out right, or the land's in a trust and they can't loan you the money. The bank won't give you a loan. But you know that if you could just put in more posts and build more fence, you could do a better job of your ability to graze your cattle. And you could do a better job of grazing so you could get more growth. Or if you had the ability to buy granola or sunflower seeds or strawberries or whatever, but you're probably not going to get a very big loan to grow strawberries in Washington on top of your grass cover. That may not fit the NRCS program. But at Synergy for Ecological Solutions, we can make that grant through Carbon Asset Network. It's just common sense that when you improve that soil health, you're going to improve carbon capture. What difference does it make? Sure, we want to go from a ton per acre to 2 tons per acre, but what do? We got to start to go from a ton to 2,100 pounds. Unless we're going to do metric and long tons, and we go from 2,200 pounds to 2,300, whatever the numbers are. So we can't make all of those improvements at one time. But we created a fiduciary pathway to be able to make those improvements. I have a really, he was a good friend. Here's our synergy chart. We have change agents. Those are the people that want to do something. We have land stewards. Those are the people that have land. We call it U360. Now, where did we come up with 360? The average donation that a person makes off of their credit card is $30 a month. It's just a reoccurring charge. You're really comfortable with giving the Humane Society $30 a month. No questions asked, that's the number. So when we got to talking, we said, well, dadgummit, let's use the average number of the size of a donation. $30 a month is $360 a year. And if we do that per acre, that's 70%, which goes to the landowner. The foundation, the nonprofit, keeps 30% to operate. But that's $242 an acre. If I got any farmer ranchers out there, I guarantee you there's not a lot of products, not a lot of crops that will produce $242 an acre. But our free enterprise system said the landowner is the steward. He deserves the bulk of the money. The bulk of the money does not need to go to an independent middleman that's running over to some Amazon or someplace with some great big company and saying, hey, I've got this professional way to pollute. It's called cap and trade. You give me money, I'll go find you some credits, and I'll pay the farmer $30 a ton. Whoopee! And I'll charge you $230 a ton. That's what we were talking about in that other panel. The numbers don't make sense. Yesterday, we proudly gave Jim Hellier's enterprise a check for $7,060 or $7,080. We paid him $242 per acre for 30 acres. He's got a center pivot on it. His center pivot is not functioning properly because the hoses don't go far enough down, and when the wind blows, he has a lot of drift, so the water is not used effectively. So he's going to take that money and improve his center pivot. NRCS wouldn't give him that money. Bank wouldn't give him that money. Here's our government at its finest. NRCS would give him $150,000 to buy an entire new one, but they wouldn't let him fix the old one. So we see these problems, but I'm not here to demonize the problems. We're here to use our nonprofit to fix the problem. Do it now, not next year. Where's my main man? Did he leave? Yeah. Where'd he go? Oh, I was going to use him as a talking point. I got a real good friend that's passed away from liver cancer. His name was Chris Ledoux. What's the importance of that? Number one, he raised 4 good kids. He's got a wonderful wife. He lived in KC, Wyoming. He won the world in the bareback riding. He was quite the entertainer. But if you've ever heard of a guy named Garth Brooks, who got to be pretty successful, he contributes his stage success to Chris Ledoux. Chris Ledoux taught me how to leave it all on the stage. He taught me how to have a high-energy impact show. He didn't teach me how to sing, but he taught me how to entertain. And that was Chris Ledoux. But Chris wrote this song, and the name of the song was called The Cowboy and the Hippie. And what happened was this cowboy was headed out of this little country town. He'd been to the rodeo, and he's headed west, and his pickup breaks down right there at the freeway, at the interstate. And it won't go nowhere, so he gets out, and he's sitting under the bridge. Well, there's this hippie sitting under the bridge, too. And the hippie looked over at the cowboy and said, man, you kind of stink. And the cowboy said, what do you mean you're telling me I stink? Have you smelled yourself lately? You hadn't had a bath in 3 days, if not longer. And they had this confrontation about who was what. But there's a very powerful ending verse on the cowboy and the hippie. And it goes like this. At the end, they realize we're just a couple of free spirits drifting across the land, doing exactly what we want to do. Said, now me, I got my thing, and you got yours. And I don't see why we can't just get along. The cowboy went west, and the hippie went east. We have to figure out how to do something, do it right, and do it now. ESG is that driving force. ESG is that change agent. ESG is that disruptor. If you want to go talk to somebody about what they're doing, or you want to talk to a corporation, or you want to talk to a business, ask them, what is your ESG plan? I got so mad when I read that dadgum carbon footprint on the bottom of my ticket the other day on Sunday. I was just ticked. And I wrote my chief operating officer in California, and I said, before the end of the day, I want you to buy 3 domains. climate wellness impact indicator. He says, what? And I said, just do it. Monday morning, 6:30, he lives in California, so it's 5:30 there. I send him my little text and I say, by the end of the day, I want you to call the state of Wyoming and I want you to register climate wellness impact indicator. What is an impact indicator? I told you all the story when I was on the panel. I took a shower. I used a towel. But the next day I used the same towel. Not because I'm a bum. I got to thinking about if all 200 or 300 people in the motel used the one towel for 2 days and we didn't have to wash the second towel, how much of an impact would that have? But who gets credit for that? Where do we give somebody credit for? When I lose weight, which isn't very often, but when I do, I want to see I lost 3 pounds. I want an indicator. Don't just tell me how much carbon footprint I used. Tell me what I did right. Give me an indicator. Help me show everyone that we're doing something, we're doing it right, and we're doing it now. Thank y'all for your time. I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank this crew. Can I call y'all a crew? Kind of oil field here. I want to thank this crew. I want to thank the people that have put all this sound together. They call them phylos. The technology people are phylos. First in, last out. By the time I get to the room and get laid down, they'll still be working away, getting all this stuff gathered up. I want to thank you guys, Jason, for putting this together, for everybody that's been involved, for all the sound people. And thank you for making the effort to come. The one thing I would ask of you, if you have an enemy that you don't like, tell them to find this and watch it. Or if you have somebody that you do like, tell them to find this and watch it. We don't have a huge crowd here, but the numbers I've been checking on, there are people watching it. And it is going to be available on YouTube. Come to my website, you might be able to find it. We'll post it if you'll let us. But let's share this message. Anybody got any questions?
You know, actually, Marvin, a quick story. My nickname in high school by a couple of my good friends was Marvin, without the R, because it's Marvin's my last name, so they called me.
They called you Marvin?
Marvin, Marvelous Marvin.
Well, let me tell you my little high school story. Because I was a rodeo clown and I lived in the Rio Grande Valley, they called me Cantinflas. Because
Yeah.
Cantinflas is a famous clown from Mexico. And so the guy that ran the little preconditioning feedlot that I worked at, he couldn't say Marvin. So he just called me Cantinflas. So I was just Cantinflas the clown.
I guess my mom wants me to tell you my college nickname was Sunshine.
Was Sunshine?
Yeah. You kind of get that one? I don't know.
I can believe it. So have you had I was going to use you as my hippie model here, that we could stand together, but you walked off.
Well,
so,
you know, I had.
So have you always had your long hair?
No.
Oh,
no.
really?
My mom's a hairstylist, so especially when I was in my teen years, I always switched it up. Like actually, and kind of embarrassing story. I had a perm in college.
You got a perm in college. All right.
For a little while.
You know, yeah. Hey, get in touch with your inner you. You bet.
Yes.
Thank y'all so much again. Appreciate it.
Let's give a round of applause for Marvin.